Grace and peace to you. My name is Noel Schoonmaker, and I'm delighted to be your instructor for this course, Introduction to Homiletics. First, I want to tell you just a little bit about myself. I grew up in South Carolina and went to Furman University for college, which is a small liberal arts university in South Carolina with a Baptist heritage. And from there, I went to Wake Forest University Divinity School, where I completed a Master's of Divinity. And after that, I did my PhD in homiletics and liturgics with a minor in New Testament at Vanderbilt University. And I've pastored 3 different churches. I pastored Churchland Baptist Church in Lexington, North Carolina for a year. Later, I pastored the First Baptist Church of Valdez, North Carolina for about 5 years. And currently, I serve as the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, which is a suburb of Nashville, and I've been at this church for about 3.5 years. I have a wife named Dana Schoonmaker. She is an incredible woman and minister and wife and mother. We have 2 young daughters. Our older daughter Maggie is 9. She's in 4th grade this year. Our younger daughter Nora is 6, and she just started the 1st grade this year. And so that's just a little bit about me and my background. I am, again, excited about being the instructor for this course, and I look forward to getting to know you as we study homiletics together. I'll ask you now to go ahead and get your syllabus out. And what we're going to do is we're going to look through it so we can have an overview of the course. That's all I want to do in this initial lecture, is just give you an overview of our course of study. You can see this is Introduction to Homiletics, a proclamation course PR 501. I hope you can see my contact information there at the top of the syllabus. You are welcome to call or text me at that phone number if you need to, and also my email address is provided there. First, a course description. This course is designed to orient students to homiletics, which is the critical study of Christian preaching. It focuses on 4 dimensions of homiletics: the history of preaching, which we will cover mainly through readings and somewhat in the lectures. Also, theologies of preaching, modern approaches to sermon construction and delivery, and finally, ethics of preaching. The goal of this course is to cultivate a basic yet critical understanding of homiletics as a discipline. You can see our course objectives there. I won't read every one of them to you. You can see the course requirements here. 1, the timely completion of assignments is very important, including reading and listening assignments. Active and thoughtful participation in our online discussions is a must. I really encourage you to plug into those conversations on Moodle. Also, in-depth reflection on sermons and homiletic writings is expected. Active participation in a small group, which we'll talk more about momentarily. And thorough engagement with 3 homiletic texts with the responsibility to teach them to the members of your small group. Our required texts for the course are Tom Long's book, The Witness of Preaching, which is an influential intro to homiletics book. It's helpful in a variety of ways. And also Paul Scott Wilson's book, A Concise History of Preaching, which gives a very brief and broad overview of the history of Christian proclamation. You can see 12 recommended texts there next on your syllabus, and from those books will come the 3 books that each student will be responsible for reading, for writing a synopsis on, and for teaching to your small group. Our grading scale you can see there listed before you. I do want to speak briefly about the grading policy. Small group participation will count 5%. Discussion participation will count 20%. Again, it's very important to be involved in the interaction online with each other. The midterm exam will be 20%. Each of the 3 book synopses will count 10% for a total of 30%. And then there will be a final essay, which will hopefully facilitate you're thinking in terms of integrating the various materials in this course toward your own homiletic approach. And that final essay will count 25% of the final grade. Course expectations. The timely completion of assignments is crucial for online education, and posts to the weekly discussion board in response to the assigned question each week will not be accepted after the due date, which will be Thursday, the Thursday of each week that we have a discussion assignment, at 11:59 p.m. Central. Failure to post your comments will result in a 0 for that week in the discussion participation category. Synopses are to be submitted by 11:59 p.m. Central on the day that they are due. I'm trying to be as specific as I can here. Also, for each day that they are late, 10 points will be deducted from the assignment grade. Now, the midterm exam and the final essay are also to be submitted by 11:59 p.m. Central on their respective due dates. And also for those assignments, for each day they are late, I will deduct 10 points from the assignment grade. Next, you can see a statement on academic integrity. It's just incredibly important as students, and especially as persons who are pursuing a seminary degree in the name of Christ, to uphold a strong display of personal and professional and academic integrity. And so any type of cheating will not be tolerated at all. I just want to let you know that. Small groups. All right. Participation in a small group is a required component of this course. Shortly after the term begins, I'm going to divide the class into small groups. The small groups will be expected to convene weekly for at least 1 hour to pray together, to read Scripture, and to discuss preaching or ministry in these small group settings. The conversations about preaching or ministry do not have to relate directly to course materials, except when you're teaching one another about your book assignments for the synopses. The week following each synopsis due date, small groups should use their time for each member to make a presentation on his or her assigned text. Otherwise, the hope is that the small group will provide a space for a real talk, talking shop about preaching and ministry among colleagues. Each group can decide how it's best for them to meet together and how to structure its sessions. Students may convene by way of telephone conference call or by way of video chat through Skype or FaceTime or another interface. You must use a medium that allows you to hear one another's voices, okay? So no discussion groups meeting on, Facebook posts or discussion boards. While the instructor, that is I, will not participate in small group sessions. Each group will need to let me know when and how you are meeting. And if you experience problems with your group, or if members of your group are not participating, please let me know. Next, let's talk about discussion participation. Participating in class discussion, as I mentioned before, is pivotal in online education. There is no substitute for the learning that occurs among colleagues in the context of shared wisdom. Therefore, we will engage in weekly class discussions about course materials on the discussion forums on Moodle. Okay? These discussions will center on assignments pertaining to various course materials, including readings, sermon listening assignments, lectures, etc. The instructor will pose a question each week. So I'll put a question on there each week. You'll see it on Moodle. And each student is required to post his or her response to the weekly question no later than the Thursday of the week for which the assignment is given. Again, all posts must be submitted by 11:59 p.m. Central on Thursday in order to be counted for that week. Additionally, each student is required to comment on at least 2 of the posts submitted by other students in the class. These comments are to be registered no later than the following Sunday at 11:59 p.m. The idea here is to get each student to post a thoughtful reflection on the discussion question that I have assigned for each week, and then to also have at least a couple of folks respond to what you have posted, so that we can have an actual conversation online, in as much as an actual conversation is possible online. This online interaction is very important because your discussion participation grade, which counts 20%, will take into account, one, the thoughtfulness of your weekly posts and their level of engagement with course materials. Number two, your comments regarding the posts of other students. And number three, any replies to questions or comments that I might pose to you after your initial post. Although our discussions will occur online rather than in person, the goal is for the online interaction to be a true conversation in which we respectfully share our thoughts and respectfully listen to the thoughts of others. So I would ask that you please limit your posts to around 200 to 300 words. And if you're responding to another person's initial post, your post doesn't need to be that long. That's just for the initial post. Next, let's talk about the book synopses. The field of homiletics encompasses a tremendous breadth of literature that continues to proliferate, and the scope of this course permits only a small taste of it. Yet we can gain a sense of current conversations in the field by engaging works in the areas of theologies of preaching, approaches to sermon construction and delivery, and ethics of preaching. Therefore, each student will be required to read one book from each of these sections, these categories, which makes a total of 3 books, and you'll be required to write a brief synopsis of each book and to teach it to those in your small group. Each synopsis should be 800 to 1,000 words in length. When you finish writing each synopsis, you will post it online according to the date indicated on the syllabus so that your small group colleagues can read it. Now, a strong synopsis includes, number 1, a summary of the main argument and the primary contributions of the book. And number 2, critical reflection on how well the book accomplished its stated intentions. So students are encouraged to approach each synopsis as an opportunity to summarize the best and most significant features of the book in your view, and perhaps also to identify a few of its limitations. Early in the semester, I'm going to assign the specific books each student is to read for these synopses in accordance with the small group assignments. Students, you are welcome to trade book assignments with one another. Within your small group, you're allowed to do that if both parties are agreeable. And you will need to let me know that you're switching books if you do that. The books will be divided up so that each small group covers the readings, and you will only be expected to read the synopses of those in your small group, although you will be able to read the synopses of other classmates if you wish to do so. Please note that you are expected to read the synopses of those in your small group and to learn the basics of those books you did not read, that you are not assigned, in preparation for the midterm exam as well as the final essay. Okay? And as far as these book synopses are concerned, I've divided these 12 books up into 3 sections. The first one is Theologies of Preaching, which are represented there by Brueggemann, Kim, LaRue, and Tisdale. The second section is Approaches to Sermon Construction and Delivery, represented by the books which are written by Craddock, Florence, Thomas, and Wilson. And then this third section, Ethics of Preaching, represented by the books written by Brown, Campbell, the Gonzaleses, and Smith. Let's now briefly discuss the midterm examination. The midterm exam will include multiple choice questions and a few fill-in-the-blank and/or short answer questions. All of these questions will be drawn from the assigned sermons, lectures, and readings. This exam is designed to encourage attentive engagement with course assignments. It will be a straightforward exam. It will not attempt to trick anybody. It will concentrate on big picture items more than micro level details. So if you listen to the required sermons, view and listen to the required lectures for the course, and read the required readings as well as the synopses of those in your small group, you should do quite well on this midterm exam. I'll be pulling for you to do well on it. You may start the exam anytime between when I issue it and the date that it is due. And once you start, you'll have a 3-hour period to complete the exam, although it should not take you nearly that long to complete it. And please note that this exam is to be completed without the aid of books, notes, recordings, or assistance from anyone or anything. And you'll have to mark a statement of academic honesty in order to receive credit for this exam. The final essay. The final assignment for this course will be a term paper of sorts that will require each student to integrate the various insights you have gained throughout our course of study with special attention to the materials in the second half of the course. The essay is required to be 1,600 to 2,000 words in length, and in the essay you'll draw on course materials to articulate certain dimensions of your own homiletic theory. That is to say, your own approach to homiletic theology or theologies of preaching, your own approach to sermon construction and delivery, and your own thoughts and approach on homiletic ethics. This essay, I hope, will serve as a good completion of your preparation so that you will be ready to enter into the next homiletics course, PR 502. Now, if you'll turn to look at the course outline, I want to make a few running comments. Week 1, which we are in now, this lecture is under week 1, is entitled Introduction to the Critical Study of Preaching. I want you to listen to this sermon by Tom Long so that you can hear the preaching of the man who wrote the primary textbook for our course that we're reading. It's wonderful to hear the actual preaching for the scholars that you are reading the homiletic theory they have written. Okay. Also, you'll see we'll start reading Long's book, and I'm excited for you to read just the first 11 pages of Brueggemann's book, Finally Comes the Poet, in which he lays out his preferred image of the preacher, which is the poet. It's a compelling piece. Then the discussion assignment you'll see is just to post a 3 to 5 minute video introducing yourself to everyone in the class and telling us what preaching means to you. The second week there, we will start we will have the first of 3 weeks where we're going to focus on history of preaching. So keep in mind, in broad strokes, the course is divided up into 4 large categories. History of preaching, okay, then theologies of preaching, then approaches to sermon construction and delivery, and finally ethics of preaching. So we'll move into that history of preaching. And in the second week, I do have you assigned to listen to one of my own sermons. I think it's only fair that if I am the instructor in a course that has to do with homiletics, I think it's only fair that you get a glimpse of my own preaching in the pulpit. Also, I'll have a lecture then on preaching and rhetoric, and you can see the discussion assignment and the reading assignment from Wilson. In the third week, we'll continue our study of the history of preaching with reading Paul Scott Wilson's book. I'll provide a lecture on ancient biblical hermeneutics for preaching, and we'll listen to a message by Reverend Dr. Cody Sanders. In the fourth week, we'll finish up our focus on the history of preaching, and I'll do a lecture on African American preaching traditions, which unfortunately often receive very brief treatment in a lot of the books on the history of preaching. So I want to give a substantive lecture on African American preaching traditions. We'll listen to a sermon by Reverend Martha Simmons, a wonderful representative of African American preaching traditions, and finish up reading the Paul Scott Wilson book. In the fifth week of the course, we will start a 3-week study on theologies of preaching. We'll listen to a sermon by Reverend Dr. Cleophas LaRue. I'm going to give a lecture on the embodied word. And that'll be the week when you'll focus in on your first synopsis assignment. So I encourage you to take the reading time that week to read that book and to write your synopsis, which you can see is due September the 25th. The first synopsis due September 25 at 11:59 p.m. Central. Then week 6, we'll continue our study of the theologies of preaching. I'll have you read part of a book by my mentor in homiletics and preaching, Reverend Dr. Brad Braxton. Read a section of his book on Preaching Paul and also listen to one of his sermons. And I've asked you in the discussion assignment to kind of look at those together and see where you see congruence, or perhaps you might see a lack of congruence in certain areas, I don't know, between his sermon and his actual written materials, his written publications about homiletics. I invite you to reflect on that, and I'll do a lecture on modern biblical hermeneutics for preaching. Also, you'll see in week 7, we'll conclude our 3 weeks of focusing on the theologies of preaching with an assignment to listen to a sermon from Reverend Dr. Justo Gonzalez, a wonderful scholar of homiletics and scripture. And I'll provide a lecture that week on contexts of preaching. Preaching is a highly contextual act, and that's an important thing to keep in mind throughout our course of study. I'll encourage you to read that week whatever book you've been assigned for the second synopsis, because it's due October the 9th at 11:59 p.m. Central. Also, please note there that in week 7, I will be unavailable from September 30th through October the 8th. And so you'll just be studying on your own. And if you have a question that arises at that time, I'll be able to respond once I'm available again, October the 9th and forward. So you're welcome to post questions then. I just want you to know I will not be able to respond until October the 9th and thereafter. So wanted to make sure you know that. And there's no discussion required that week so that you can use the time to sink into preparing that second book synopsis. Week 8 is fall break. And I believe a break should be a break. So inasmuch as you can have a break, I encourage you to take a break. All right, week number 9 here will be midterm week. I've got an assignment to listen to a sermon by Nadia Bolz-Weber, or Reverend Bolz-Weber, is a prominent voice in the public square now in terms of Christian ministry, theology, and preaching. It's a brief sermon, but very intriguing. There'll be no lecture assignment that week, so you can use the time to prepare for the midterm. Got a couple of reading assignments there and the discussion assignment you can see. In week 10, we will start a 3-week study on approaches to sermon construction and delivery. Okay? So you'll see an assignment to listen to Professor Ami Lee, who is at Fuller Theological Seminary in California. Listen to her sermon on Revelation 2. I'll provide a lecture on moving from text to sermon. We'll continue reading Tom Long's textbook. I have an essay there by Bartlett for you to read and a discussion assignment about how the Bible should impact a sermon. In week 11, you'll see there'll be a sermon assigned by one of the most famous modern homileticians. He is no longer with us, but only deceased in the last few years, Reverend Dr. Fred Craddock. And his sermon, When the Roll is Called Down Here, I hope you will enjoy. We'll talk about the new homiletic, which is a major development in homiletic theory that is traced to Craddock, especially his work, and then the work of Eugene Lowry and others thereafter, but especially it's traced to Craddock's work. And then you'll also be able to discuss the new homiletic in our discussion assignment. In week 12, we'll finish up our study of approaches to sermon construction and delivery. Listen to a powerful sermon by Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III. I'll provide a lecture on sermon forms and homiletic imagination. We'll read a piece by Henry Mitchell, in my opinion, one of the greatest scholars of homiletics, and probably the foremost scholar in terms of his publications, definitely the foremost scholar of African American homiletic traditions in modern times, for sure. And then we'll continue reading, finish up reading Long's book there, and we'll discuss the role of celebration in preaching that week. In week 13, we'll start our last emphasis of the course, which is ethics of preaching. We'll spend our last 3 weeks looking at that. A sermon by the famous preacher, Reverend Barbara Brown Taylor. I'll provide a lecture that deals with gender and race in preaching. That week, you'll be reading a book in the third section of the book Synopses. And for that one, you'll be reading either Brown, Campbell, the Gonzaleses, or Smith. And that third synopsis, please note, will be due November 20th at 11:59 p.m. Central. And then week 14 there, you can see, we'll have another listening assignment. I'll provide a lecture on postmodern homiletics. We'll read some from John McClure, who was the chair of my dissertation committee when I was at Vanderbilt. A well-respected, incredible scholar of homiletics. And we'll finish up reading Long's book that week. That will be the final assignment in Long's book. And we'll discuss McClure's collaborative preaching model that week. In week 15, I've got you listening to a sermon by Bishop Minerva G. Carciano. And we will also be having a lecture assignment there on the ethics, character, and the authority of the preacher, which is an intriguing topic. And then I'll have you read some of Jackson W. Carroll's book, As One with Authority. So Craddock wrote the famous homiletics book, As One Without Authority. And Carroll's famous book followed up on that, As One with Authority, which has some very helpful categories and concepts of the preacher's authority and the minister's authority in general. And then I'll also be reading a really helpful piece at the beginning of Turner and Hudson's book, Saved from Silence. Anyway, I think you'll enjoy that last week of study there. We'll talk about the authority of preachers in your denominational or congregational context. And then finally, week 16, I want you to focus on the final essay, which again will hopefully be a summarization and integration of a variety of materials from which you have learned throughout the course. And that will be due, the final essay, on December 9th at 11:59 p.m. Central. That's a brief overview of our course of study. I'm excited to embark on this course of study with you, and I want you to know if I can be of help to you, please don't hesitate to contact me. And I am a pastor, a working pastor, as well as an instructor for this course. If you have prayer requests or I can pray for you about something, please don't hesitate to let me know, and I will commit to lifting you up in prayer. Until our next session, grace and peace to you in the name of Jesus Christ.